Kia ora, I'm Ruth and welcome back to the Happy Saver podcast and part 6 of this special 6-part financial independence series. On my blog, thehappysaver.com, I created a comprehensive financial independence series of 6 blog posts where I mapped out a plan to help you on your way to becoming financially independent. Now, because I know that there are some in my audience who only read my blog and others who only listen to this podcast, I wanted to make sure that both parts of my audience got the same information. So what I've done is I have turned each blog post into a podcast episode. Fear not, it is a temporary change to the regular episodes where I chat with a diverse bunch of people and I learn their story and condense it down so that you can hear helpful, relatable stories from Kiwis who are sharing their experiences, their tips and point of view on personal finance in New Zealand. Today's episode is probably one of my favourites. It's about investing and it is the last episode in this 6-part series. But before I get into it, I just have a quick word from today's sponsor. PocketSmith has many uses and this one is close to my heart. As a blogger and podcaster, I manage my small business using it. You might manage a trust, rental income or selling products. PocketSmith can easily do it all. Throughout the month, I categorise each financial move my business makes, and at the end of the tax year, PocketSmith consolidates all my financial transactions and assets into an organised, exportable format that I can share with my accountant. The more efficiently I can provide my financials to them, the faster they can complete my return, saving time and money and reducing errors. And let's not forget the biggest reason I'm a fan of this software, it lets me know exactly how my business is performing. If you want to supercharge your finances with PocketSmith, have we got a deal for you. Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of PocketSmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/thehappysaver. That's pocketsmith.com/thehappysaver. Congratulations, you have made it to the final episode in this series of 6, and today I'm looking forward to talking about investing. Now, investing, from the get-go, I better tell you this, it can be incredibly complex, but you'll be pleased to know I have found a way to simplify it. I used to feel overwhelmed by the options available, but now I don't, and I'm hoping to help you feel the same way. But still, this is one of the most challenging podcasts I have ever compiled. Condensing investing into a single episode is no easy feat. My blog, The Happy Saver, was born out of my search for information about what I could invest our money in. It took me years to arrive at our current strategy, which combines KiwiSaver and ETF investments. I don't want you to take so long to settle on your own strategy. I'm no different to you when I say I wish I knew then what I know now. We had some margin in our budget and I was looking for something to make us money. I started by asking my bank's opinion and followed a trail of crumbs of information from there. And ultimately, I finally found good information, and that's what I want to share with you today. Now, here comes a different type of disclaimer. If it's not apparent already, abundantly apparent, I am not a financial anything. I've got 0 financial qualifications. I have a personal interest in money, so I talk about it a lot. I can't say invest in this, and this is no help to you, I know. When you search for guidance on investing, I know you will become overwhelmed by the available options and be advised to go away and do your research or pay a financial advisor. As an avid reader of everything that comes in my inbox, I understand the volume of companies vying for your and my investing dollars. Many provide pretty good resources to help you learn, but ultimately they want to sell you one or preferably many of their many products. At the end of this podcast, I am still going to tell you to do your own research, but I'm going to narrow down your brief significantly and encourage you to engage deeply with some essential resources and then make your own plan. I have discovered over the years that most of us can manage our own money. Still, the complexity of the financial industry has led us to believe that we just can't. And I'm telling you that if you keep your approach simple, you can. So let's cut to the chase here. I have found that investing in ETFs, which are called exchange traded funds, is the most cost-effective and easiest way to make money. Pretty bold claim there. You will also hear these funds referred to as index funds. Now, mixing the two terms, it drives fund managers a little bit crazy because there are differences between them, but I think that using either term, ETF or index fund, is acceptable for the average person on the street. Now, I wrote about the differences between ETF and index funds way back in 2018 on my blog, The Happy Saver. It was entertaining and you can read about it. Just search for mutual fund, index fund, ETF, please explain. Now, for the rest of this episode, for simplicity, I will refer to ETFs. I have chosen to invest in ETF funds for the following reasons. Their fees are low. They are passively managed, which means humans are primarily removed from the process, which lowers fees and bias. I don't have to pick stocks and research companies. They are lower risk because they are so diversified. I can manage the buying, the monitoring, and the selling of them myself, and my investments will provide me with a passive income. Everything I have learned about ETF investing started with American investor J.L. Collins, who is the author of the book, The Simple Path to Wealth. If you only engage with one financial resource in your quest to learn about investing, let this be the one. And I'm quite serious about that. There are many different ways to engage with The Simple Path to Wealth. You can read his book, or you can search him on YouTube or in your podcast app. You can also search The Happy Saver, my blog, for blogs on index fund and ETF investing, and I've written extensively about this over the years. Now, J.L. Collins' most recent book is called Pathfinders, and it's also an excellent read. It is a collection of stories from people who have followed his first book, The Simple Path to Wealth. So please do follow up on links about The Simple Path to Wealth, and if you hear a term mentioned that you don't understand, just pause or stop what you're reading and just Google it. This is how you learn. You will become familiar with a lot of investing jargon very quickly. Now, J.L. Collins taught me that less is more when it comes to investing. While in other parts of life, the more we engage, the greater our success, the opposite is true regarding ETF investing. Investors who consistently buy low-cost passive ETFs over a long period of time will outperform most others. Well, don't believe me? Well, there is a research company called Spiva, S-P-I-V-A. And their job is to compare actively managed funds, which are investment funds where the fund managers are actively picking and choosing investments to make up their fund, against an index benchmark such as the US 500, which is the top 500 companies in the USA. If you visit Spiva and you play around with the results by region, you can see that in America, 59% of managed funds underperformed the benchmark in the last year. In the previous 5 years, 78% underperformed, and in the last 15 years, 88% underperformed. Spiva shows that in the short term, most managed funds underperform the benchmark or the average of the share market that they are monitoring, and it just gets worse over time. So this begs the question, how are you and I going to pick the right managed fund to be in the 12% who managed to beat the index over a 15-plus year period? Our chances of getting it right are so incredibly slim. And once I read this, I knew I had to keep searching for better investment options. If you extend the thought that colossal fund managers do a really poor job of beating the share market average, then just think about how an investor buying a single company stock could fare any better. Over time, most of us simply can't predict how a company will continue to perform. Who is the exception? Warren Buffett. Are you the exception? No. So what is an ETF? It's simply a basket of stocks designed to mimic a part of or an entire index. And to quote Investopedia, they invest in the same assets using the same weights as the target index. New Zealand has an ETF that tracks the top 50 stocks of the New Zealand share market, the NZX. They are a basket of companies selected to match precisely how those companies appear on the NZX. America also have funds that track the top 500 companies as they appear on the share market. Again, they create a basket of companies selected to match how they appear on the S&P 500 as precisely as possible. At the time of writing this, the largest company was Microsoft Corp, which made up 7.1% of the S&P 500, and the smallest, or the 500th company, was Paramount Global Class B, making up just 0.01%. Many countries offer ETFs that match their share market's top performers. The simple path to wealth taught me that over time, investing in an ETF will outperform most, if not all, people who actively invest by buying and selling single stocks. So why would we want to buy this basket full of companies? I mentioned the New Zealand share market and the American share market. Those two in particular, and many other countries besides, in the short term, their markets might go up and down, but over time, they have only gone up. By buying an ETF that holds all of the top companies, I am following the share market's upward trend, meaning that the value of my investment will also increase over time. Now, just a quick word on risk. I've just explained that over time, while the trend is up, you need to know that there are some peaks and troughs showing the share market has increased or decreased. Currently, the New Zealand share market is a bit flat, but given time, it'll wander higher again. And while investors feel no risk when things are up, they feel they are exposed to risk when things drop. Now, my view on risk when it comes to ETF investing is that movement up and down is typical and expected. And because you only invest money in the share market for the long term, even if the value drops, it will go back up over time. I've been through a few decent market drops and come out the other side just fine. If any part of you thinks you might panic and sell, well, you just need to toughen up and also go back to learning how this type of investment works in the long run. And that's going to make you feel more comfortable. Alongside risk is the well-worn phrase, you don't put money in the share market that you can't afford to lose. Well, this rang true for me when buying individual company shares, but it is less true with an ETF investment strategy. I don't invest to lose money, and having committed to buying all of the companies all of the time, my investment goes up over time. To be an investor, you need routine, consistency, planning, and the ability to work towards a long-term goal. And if you fail to do any of the above, you will dive into investing, win some, lose some, chop and change, and fail to grow long-term wealth. Investing will feel terribly risky with this type of approach. In J.L. Collins' book, he talks about ETFs being self-cleansing. When I own an ETF fund, I always own the best companies, and the premise is pretty simple. The share market of a country is full of companies going about their business, each wanting to grow and succeed, and I want to invest in those successful companies. However, despite their best efforts and intentions, well, not all of the companies succeed, and most will die off eventually. The trouble is, I don't know which companies will succeed or fail. No one does. However, when I zoom out and I look at all of the companies on the share market collectively over a long period, they all go up. If the share market only goes up over time, then buying all of the companies instead of picking and choosing a couple makes sense. I no longer have to buy and sell to continue holding only the most successful companies. An ETF will always hold the top performing companies as they are represented on the stock exchange of that country. At all times, I hold the best of the best in what are considered to be the best sectors, the best companies, and the best products. And when the needs and wants of the world change, the fund keeps pace with those changes. And the real benefit of an ETF investment is that I don't have to spend time trying to determine the next big thing. The US stock market currently has technology stocks leading the charge, but that won't always be the case. What's next? No idea. But I do know that when the world decides to go in a different direction and massive companies grow as a result, I'll hold them in my ETF. And if one or two companies within that fund have incredible growth and success, well, they will pull up the performance of the whole fund, and I'll get to enjoy that rise. And if they crash and burn and no one wants what they're selling anymore, well, they're going to sink to the bottom of the index before being replaced by the next top performer. ETFs are self-cleansing. All I have to do is purchase an ETF a little and often and go about my day. Johnny and I began doing just that in 2015 as we transitioned from managed funds we held with our bank into two ETFs, the New Zealand 50 and the US 500. And we've not stopped investing since. Month by month, as per the wisdom of J.L. Collins, And as a result of doing a lot of research and reading myself, our net worth has calmly grown. Another benefit of these investments is that the fund manager calculates and pays all the taxes. Depending on your fund manager, imputation credits can also be used to offset tax owed in other areas of your life. Now, during the last 9 years, we have experienced dips and drops in the share market, but more importantly, we've actually enjoyed a slow and steady rise in the overall value of our investments. From time to time, we've had some lump sums of money to invest, but mostly we have set aside a portion of every single paycheck we have ever received into our investments. You should aim to invest a little and often and always prioritize investing in your budget. When COVID-19 came along, we cut spending everywhere we could, but we still invested as we always had. Why? Because any money I can invest today will grow over time. So a very good question I'm often asked is, how do you make money when you invest in ETFs? To achieve financial independence, Johnny and I need scale. We need as much money invested into large, low-fee, passive ETFs as possible to draw an income from it. And my rule of thumb is to use what's called the 4% rule to determine how much money we need invested. So for every $100,000 invested once a year, we can sell off 4% or $4,000 of our investment and just spend that money. The fund will continue to grow despite selling off a portion of it. This strategy is how those in the FIRE or Financial Independence Retire Early community live off their investments. We invest our after-tax income into our ETFs, and that money grows in two ways: capital gains and dividends. If I had invested $10,000 in the US 500 in July 2015, today it would be worth $18,000. And the gains have come from reinvested dividends and capital gains due to the difference between what I paid per share in 2015 and what it's worth if I were to sell it today. Also worth noting is that we are taxed on the dividends, but not capital gains in New Zealand. Now, I use the New Zealand company ShareSite to track how our investments are performing, and they have a handy share checker tool so that you can go back in time and work out what your investment would be worth both then and now. And this is super handy or painful for those who suffer from regret and say things like, "Oh, if only I'd bought XYZ back in 2014. It's worth going to have a play with and checking it out. Now, I've talked about passive income, and when I first started learning about investing in the share market, I thought share investors made money purely via dividend income, but that's just not the case. Dividends are nice to have, but the real growth comes from capital gains and the rise in value of the ETF itself. Our net worth grows due to our small dividends being automatically reinvested into our fund and the capital gains we get over time. Passive income is the income we draw from it. So you'll agree that apart from being a diligent investor for almost a decade, my input in the rise of this fund has been really passive. Apart from working to make the money we invest, I've not had to do much. Johnny and I are now applying the 4% rule to our investments and drawing a passive income from them on May the 1st each year. And we simply sell off a set amount and the money arrives in our bank account a few days later, ready to be spent. Now, unlike some parts of life, when it comes to ETF investing, more is not better. And as I mentioned, emails from investment companies pour into my inbox regularly, each touting their wares. However, in the case of ETF investing, less is more. By investing in a sizable, low-fee fund that buys an entire market, such as VTSAX, as suggested by J.L. Collins, or a similar type of fund, such as US 500 or Total World Fund, I'm buying all the best companies across every sector and industry. If they are any good at business, I will own them, and my investments will be incredibly diverse. Therefore, I see no reason to buy into any of the niche funds, also called satellite funds, that providers offer. According to J.L. Collins, owning one large fund provides all the diversification you need, and you can easily double up and end up owning the same companies twice if you invest in multiple ETFs. I think of it in the following way. Have you ever stood at the supermarket looking for one key thing, whether it be chips, sauce, hummus, or wine? You want one type of food, but the choice is overwhelming. You ask yourself why they offer such a vast array of what is essentially the same thing. It is because the original company and then all the competitors that spring up are looking for a way to appeal to every buyer looking for that product. And the same is true for the range of ETFs on offer. Each provider needs investors' money to flow into their platform so that they can make money via the fees and the services that they charge. And the more they can offer, the higher the volume of investors they can attract. But that doesn't mean you have to buy what they're selling. Now, I've tried a few niche funds over the last 5 years. I did it just to test the theory of a single fund being enough, and on each occasion, I proved the theory correct, managing to break even either barely or, in the case of one niche fund investment, watching it lose 75% of its value. The longer I invest in just 2 ETF funds, the more steadfast I actually become. And that conviction comes from following the wisdom of so many people in the personal finance space who say to buy on a regular basis into 1, maybe 2 large ETFs and just never stop. Now let's talk about fees for just a moment. ETFs are cheaper to invest in because they are passive investments. Very few people are engaged in running them, meaning fewer people need to be paid because they simply track an index and rebalance the fund at various points throughout the year. Different providers charge various fees, which are all lower than 0.5%. Much like KiwiSaver fees, the lower the fee, the better, and anything over this percentage is considered high. The next point I want to make is you don't need to buy individual company shares. Yes, you can have a dabble on the side if you have a particular fondness for a company and want to invest in it directly, but don't kid yourself that you have the inside knowledge on where this company is headed, what it's doing, or how society will react to those moves. If you take on a single company, just make sure it's a tiny part of your net worth and just comfort yourself that whether it goes well or poorly, it won't impact your overall financial plans. And you already probably own it in your ETF fund anyway. Now, for those listening to this in New Zealand, your question will no doubt be, what providers should you research here? Now, New Zealand has a small range of low-fee ETF and index fund providers who will give you access to the type of funds that JL Collins recommends. He talks about VTSAX, which is Vanguard's Total Stock Market Index Fund. VTI is the ETF version of this index fund. VOO, which is a Vanguard S&P 500 ETF, is another name that you'll hear. And when I first read his book, I thought, oh, great, but I bet it doesn't exist in New Zealand. But a variant of it did, the SmartShares US 500 ETF. And since I first began to invest, more options have sprung up. Now, remember how I said that the investment industry is massive? Well, when you are looking specifically for an ETF, you have just narrowed down your search. When I first began investing this way, there were just 2 low-fee options in the market, and it was SmartShares and InvestNow. A few years ago, along came another provider, Kernel Wealth. There are others, but start your research with this group. They each offer a slightly different take on the same thing, and I'm being typically vague here because I want you to read The Simple Path to Wealth and really learn for yourself what you need to look for. There are other options still, but due to their much higher fees and complexity with foreign tax obligations, I'd be more cautious if you are intent on growing your wealth to the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. Fees matter, and the more money your provider takes, the less you have left over. Also, since I've become an ETF investor, there have been many smaller companies coming and going. So if you see a new company enter the market, just be wary. They often have large marketing budgets, but they just don't last the distance. Now, let's not forget the more traditional investment companies, of which there are many, such as ASB Securities, Jarden Direct, etc., just to name a few. They will also give you access to the same ETFs. Just keep an eye out for additional fees being added to the transaction. And which provider is best, you may ask? Well, I've got no idea. I believe it comes down to researching your options, all of which are low fees, finding a platform that you consider easy to use, and making a start. If you pick a social media platform of your choice, you will find a comment section full of vehement ideas about what fund, what platform, etc. is better. And that puts a lot of pressure on people to make the right choice. However, because almost no one ever goes back and backcosts the decisions that they made, yet they are very vocal in the comments section on the internet, how do they ever really know if paying a 0.01% fee, either higher or lower, really move the needle on their wealth? Getting the basics right, in my mind, is just far more important. Pick a low fee, passive, large ETF such as VTSAX, VTI, US 500 or the Total World Fund, set up an automatic investment and then monitor it over time. When I first began, I set a goal to invest $1,000 before I made any changes or tweaks. And when I reached that number, I reassessed and then I set a new goal of $5,000, at which point I would reassess. It starts small and it builds, and I still set these goals. You are investing for the long term, which is 10 plus years. Let it ride and don't overthink your decision making. But when you reach your review period, change and adjust your strategy or provider if you feel it's appropriate. A very good question that comes up is, why do I just invest in America? What about the rest of the world? Johnny and I invest in a US 500 fund plus a New Zealand 50 fund, which gives us exposure to America and Aotearoa. We have capped our New Zealand investment at $100,000 and are steadily building up the US fund. We now just add about $100 a month to the NZ50 and add $1,000 plus each month into the US 500. Plus, of course, we have our KiwiSaver investments, which are high growth and therefore very much also invested in international share markets. J.L. Collins explains well in his book why investing in America is enough. So once again, go and read or watch or listen to it. The United States of America is where it's at if you want to become a massive global company. And yes, without a doubt, there are other countries worldwide with huge global companies, but America does seem to have the highest concentration. Therefore, by investing in a fund tracking these companies' progress, I'm buying a tiny slice of all of them. Will they always be the biggest and the best? Maybe, maybe not, but for now, they are. And J.L. Collins has said that if you can't buy VTSAX, a US 500 fund will suffice, and that's what I've done. But he says purchasing a Total World Fund is not a bad option either. It still contains all those top American companies, and it includes top companies from other countries. So it's a valid option and one that I've considered. But this is where I will double down on my view that there is no perfect way to invest. What you choose now is good enough for now. I'm okay with sticking with my SmartShares US 500 ETF, which has had historic 5-year returns of 15%, after taxes of 28% and their 0.34% fund charge. Because the Total World ETF has only returned 11% after taxes of 28% and their 0.4% fund charge. So despite their politics, I can't see America falling on such hard times as an entire economy that all their massive companies crumble and fail. I'm also happy to stay invested in my NZ50 fund in a more minor way because, again, despite politicians doing what they do, I still think I belong to an incredible country trying to do its best. And if I lived in Australia, I'd probably want to invest in their Australian 200 fund. It's okay to have some small home country bias and own a small slice of every company here too. I'm sorry once again for the length of this podcast, but investing is such a massive topic, and I've tried to weave in answers to all of the questions I'm often asked, and I get asked many questions. So in conclusion, I'd kind of say to you that there is no perfect investment strategy, but there are perfectly good enough strategies for you and your money. Investing is the last episode in the series of 6 because, apart from investing in KiwiSaver early in your journey, investing in the share market needs to come at the right time in your financial life. And that time is when you have all your other ducks in a row. For those who have FOMO and are desperate to start investing, just remember that you are already investing with your KiwiSaver. And with every $1 you pay off your debt, you have just increased your net worth by $1. So keep up to date with your financial housekeeping and make sure you know your net worth month by month and that you are budgeting and managing your money well. Make sure you have an emergency fund for when life kicks you in the butt, and make sure you pay into your retirement fund. And most importantly, in my view, you get the heck out of debt. And once you've cleared the debt, well, you've finally got money to invest. For those itching to start, having a broad-based, low-fee ETF on the go, even if they invest only $10 a week into it, is not the worst idea. And why do you say that, Ruth? Well, you can run it alongside your other investments, such as your rental property, and see, learn, and understand in real time with real money how they are wealth-building machines over time. If your investment strategy changes over time, you will already understand how ETF investing works and could be an alternative option for you. ETF investing is, without a doubt, proving to be one of the best decisions that we've ever made. Over the years, friends I've spoken to about ETFs, they scoff and they disagree and they go about their forms of investing, and that's fine, each to their own. But given we are friends, I stay in touch and observe the lack of financial progress they each tend to make over time. ETF investing is slow, it's boring, and it's undramatic. It's a slow burn. But as I have observed in my net worth, our steady drip-fed and occasional bulk purchase-fed investing, it seems to gather more momentum. Now, reaching our first $100,000 invested was painfully slow, and the second was not much faster. However, the momentum is growing steadily due to the capital gains, the compounding returns of dividends that are reinvested, and the money that we continue to add each month. Johnny and I don't earn high incomes, yet we've found a way to grow our wealth through an investment that we can use to improve our lives. There's no leverage, there's no third parties, no upkeep, no hassle. Growing an ETF investment takes 1,000 tiny actions, such as making a monthly investment over decades. Now that we are almost a decade in, with many hundreds of thousands of dollars invested, I'm starting to see the power of compounding returns, and that just gives me a huge sense of peace about our financial future. I'll continue to blog about the performance of our investments so that you can follow along. So as we round this out, what do I want you to do now? The key to our future success was that I became interested in learning how to grow our money. It took me a while, but I began to realize that we could use the income from our day jobs to invest in a way that would provide us with passive income in the future. But don't just take my word for it. Spend a week doing your homework and do a fast and furious deep dive into index funds and ETF investing. Follow up on those links I've talked about, and from there, Google the keywords and people you hear mentioned repeatedly. Do your research and then commit to making a start. Then observe the process, get comfortable with it, and just settle in for a long and steady investment journey. So that is it. That is the end of my 6-part series on financial independence. The primary reason I write my blog, The Happy Saver, and create this podcast is to help you out, to help you be better with your own money, and I sincerely hope I have done that. So that's it for today. If you have enjoyed today's episode and found it helpful, please share it with your friends and whānau. It's the best way that people can learn about what I do and the resources I share. And finally, get out there and kōrero more about money with your own friends and whānau and help me continue to help others be better with money. So until next time, happy saving.